And welcome to episode 61 of the Relationship Restaurant. We are Poppy and Jeff Spencer. Delighted you are joining us here on the Relationship Restaurant. We're all about heart health and communication. Today we're talking about the 4 F's and people pleasing and what you should know about that. You know, in the past we've talked about attachment styles, and today we're going to kind of go back and talk about undermines these attachment styles and why today, with all of our vast knowledge about social science and human behavior, we still get jammed up in our relationships.
You know, it is so true. I mean, don't you think with all the psychology,
we should all have it all figured out by now. We
should have it figured out, but we don't. But you know what? There is some good news. I think once we have that recognition of what something is, we can therefore adjust and adapt our relationships.
And we were talking to a client the other day when we brought up a topic, and when they were able to see it and put it out there in front of themselves, what they've been struggling with, they're like, oh, okay, now I see it.
Oh, I get it. Oh my gosh, that's totally me. So that's what we want to hopefully get for you today, is to contribute that you recognize something that maybe you're familiar with, either for yourself or with somebody you know. Maybe you can help a friend. So, you know, some time ago, a marriage and family therapist named Peter Walker created a name for what might be considered the most unfortunate relationship dynamic, and something that many of us can relate to, ourselves included to some degree, and certainly many of our clients who come to us. And Walker began by describing the fight or flight phenomenon. We all know the fight or flight, right? And there's also something else that is in there as well, and it's the freeze type. But Walker gives us a 4th type, which he calls the Fawn, F-A-W-N, like the deer. And we will dive deeper to that in a minute, you know. And we all know the fight or flight, right? It's common with all animal species.
When dealing with some sort of a fear, a conflict, you have to make a decision. Are you going to address it head on, face it, fight it, or are we going to run from it?
Right. And we used to have, and I'll just segue for a minute here, because this is one of our favorite things that we do all the time.
Segue?
A segue.
Okay.
No, but I was going to talk about when people avoid conflict, when they're professional conflict avoiders, and they will seek that flight out in, you know, and we see this in animals in nature, right? They fly. And when they seek out that flight, we had a very dear family friend that, whenever there was going to be a perceived conflict, and she was a part of it during a vacation, she said, you know what, I think instead of going to lunch with you where there might be some tension or problem there, I'm just going to go to the coffee shop.
Right. So that's like our
inside code.
That's our inside code. Whenever there's some real big challenges, we say, we're going to go to the coffee shop.
And so when clients come to us and present, we say, oh, she's a coffee shopper. You know, she's a coffee shop goer. So that's what we do. So anyway, Walker comes up with these 4 F's then, right? Fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And we will get into that in just a minute, but we wanted to start with something that may or may not be familiar to you. And it's a concept that's come up quite a bit in our work with
and it's a term you might have heard, and it's one we like to help define, because it is something that regularly happens. It's called gaslighting. And it comes up all the time, and it's going to be a part of this conversation. We want to define that. And according to Stephanie Sarkis, a PhD, gaslighting is a pattern of manipulation tactics used by abusers, narcissists, dictators, and cult leaders to gain control over a person or people. The goal is to make a victim or victims question their own reality and depend upon that gaslighter. Okay. Now, we're going to give an example of this. We worked with a couple with a wife, we'll call her Betsy and we'll call him Kevin, said that she was always drunk when they had sex. This came up.
They sat in front of us and were like, okay, wait a minute. And Kevin's face, first of all, was like, what?
Kevin began to question her and object to this, because he said that's simply not true. But the precedent for her to set up lying to us, the therapist, was set, okay? As well as saying she couldn't have sex unless she was drunk, okay? Which, of course, made Kevin feel terrible about this whole thing, and with it, the implication that he made sure she was drunk in order to have sex. So this whole dynamic, you know, put Kevin in a terrible spot. He, first of all, was questioning, of course, his reality. He's like thinking to himself, is that really the case?
Have I been getting her drunk?
Has she been doing that? And then he started bringing up points to us that, well, I know that can't be the case because so many times there wasn't an opportunity to be drinking. It wasn't all happening after a party or after a big night of, sitting around glasses of wine or something. He knew that wasn't the case, but it was unfortunately, set up this really, really challenging dynamic.
And so he wondered, when we met with him alone, he said, how could I have gone 3 years with no sex? And it's because he bought into that reality. We helped him understand that.
He explained he had no warmth, no kindness from the spouse. And he started believing this mirror that Betsy had showed him, that he was really kind of unworthy of love and affection. Even Kevin, when he said we looked at other couples, he wondered if they too were in the same dynamic. Is everybody doing the same thing I'm doing? Are they all in the same position I'm in?
Is nobody having sex?
Is this common? And he also began to believe that sex was maybe a bad thing because Betsy had gaslit him into believing that this was her reality. In social and professional circles, people would often comment that Kevin was really a great guy, and Kevin would say to himself, "No, I'm not. That I get this reaffirmed at home that I'm not.
Right.
I get told that I'm not a great guy." So he almost was pushed back on people that say, "You're such a great guy. I don't understand what you're talking about."
Right. And gaslighting occurs like a slow drip. It's really imperceptible, and you can't really tell when it's happening, so that someone's reality is altered ever so slightly as it happens. We worked with another client whom we'll call Jennifer. She shared that she had been accused of being the most positive person, thought she could infuse happiness with her spouse, Ben, whom she later believed had undiagnosed depression and fit on the narcissism spectrum. Jennifer, who was very demonstrative, very friendly, outgoing, would do proverbial cartwheels in an attempt to make Ben's world brighter. She'd leave him notes. She specially prepared meals. She left special gifts at the offices, little surprises, love texts. And she'd even take on the tasks at home for which he was responsible and which they'd already agreed and he had committed to doing, just to get his attention and ultimately some affection. And as it turned out, she realized, I can only do so many of these cartwheels. Mm-hmm. She said to us and kind of wringing her hands, like, what is wrong with me? Why, is there something wrong with me? Am I crazy? Am I not?
That's how gaslighting is probably happening to you when you ask yourself, am I crazy?
Right. And that's a good
meter. If that you find yourself asking yourself that question, that could be happening to you.
So, in our brief overview of gaslighting, we can see some of these intersections where this plays out in Peter Walker's 4 F's that he talks about. So, first of all, he talks about the defense mechanisms. We have 2 on our emotional clock. And tell our listeners what that is.
Yeah, the emotional clock is a tool that Poppy and I developed. It helps people when they are struggling with communication. It helps define kind of where they are in that struggle. The right side of the clock kind of takes them through a variety of steps, and usually these all evolve out of a lack of communication. When you aren't talking, when you aren't communicating, you work yourself around, and you have feelings of confusion, shame, and guilt. Often to get into anger is usually one of the last steps before you hit this wall. We call it the 6 o'clock moment, where you're considering that fight or flight and making a decision. Am I going to stay in this relationship and try to make it work, or am I going to bail out?
Right. And so the emotional...
And the rest of the clock is if you do make a decision, move forward, and how to, whatever your decision is, it helps you get back to a very good place where you're able to find love once again.
Right. And the thing about the emotional clock that's helpful is that it can be a tactile tool to help us get into like the left brain, so we can get out of emotional overwhelm and start to sort out some of these emotions that are threatening to take over our lives.
And you can see where you are, how you got there, and how you move on from that.
And so it provides yet another coping mechanism to deal with some of these defense mechanisms that we put into place, and especially the fight or flight, freeze, and fawn that Walker describes.
And we didn't really talk about freeze, but I think that's kind of obvious by the name title. It's essentially doing nothing. It's kind of, it's a bit of a panic, and you just sort of do nothing and hide.
Right. And I know we worked with one client a couple of years ago who was she was a volunteer leader at her school with her kids, and she was just doing all sorts of wonderful things in the community. And something that came very naturally to her is preparing a recipe that she had made dozens and dozens of times. And when she went to try and prepare it, because she was in such an unhealthy relationship and on the brink of divorce, she just became static. She couldn't do anything. She said, I don't know what step to take next. I don't know what ingredients to put in this recipe. She literally froze on something that she was able to do in her sleep before that. So the freezing can take the place. It can be like being embroiled in video games or TV or something passive. Usually you're isolated.
It takes you away from whatever it is.
Right. Correct. And so often, but today we really want to spend
talk about
time
the fawning.
Fawn and people pleasing, and why that is such a big link between those two. So if you are a people pleaser or a recovering people pleaser or conflict avoider, this podcast is for you. So often we see fawns in a codependent relationship. And of course, we don't believe as relationship counselors and experts that being codependent in a relationship is a healthy thing. And many years ago, when I was doing my graduate work, I came across somebody who had an epiphany for me, and it's D.W. Winnicott, who described many years ago, he named a phenomenon, the good enough mother. And that's the mother who's neither smothering nor neglectful, but allows little opportunities of autonomy to her new toddler.
I think this is something that's we've watched over the years. Many mothers struggle with this thing because they're trying to be more than the good enough mother, trying to do it all,
perfect mother,
trying to be perfect, and trying to make sure that their child never has any harm or challenge fall upon them.
Or failure.
And of course, that is not a healthy way to raise a child, because with those things, the child is able to learn coping mechanisms, learn how to deal with challenges, learn how to work their way through problems in their lives, not just have them all taken care of.
Right. And so what happens is that so often the perfect mother is actually not desirable. That is the unhealthy model which to file. But the good enough mother is someone, and if we went back to the toddler that's peeking behind mom's leg as she enters a room and there's maybe one or two other people in the room, she may bring her toddler out by holding his or her hand and continue her conversation, not stop because the toddler is clearly uncomfortable, but keep the toddler within the safe proximity, physical proximity of her, and then gently maybe encourage the child to go over to the far side of the room and play with some Legos. Mom is still there. And then eventually mom is able to leave, possibly leaving the child with a transitional object, which is a bunkie or a pacifier or a favorite blanket or a stuffed animal or something, until mom can return. And so when mom returns several hours later, that's a healthy reunification that she and the toddler have. And so Winnicott describes this as the good enough mother. So what does that have to do with relationships? It has everything to do with the relationships, because those are how attachment styles are developed as in all human beings when they were younger. And if they have an attachment style that is emotionally withdrawn or insecure, that child will tend to, unless they've gone through some really good therapy or counseling or some work with it and not have identified it, that child will carry that insecure attachment style to their adult relationship.
And this is the cause of often the fawning.
And right. And so Walker maintains, and when you read this, this is a great quote.
Individuals who experience good enough parenting in childhood arrive in adulthood with a healthy, flexible response repertoire to any danger. In other words, the 4 F's of fight, flight, freeze, and fawn can be used appropriately and in a healthy manner when confronted with danger or conflict. Okay? So let's break this down. People who have good, healthy fight responses are able to be calm and assertive in an escalated engagement. They're able to be detached enough to not become emotionally embroiled, but firm enough to stand their ground and hold their position if it is something that is highly valued and non-negotiable. And for example, we work with a client who, after his divorce, learned that the mother had been alienating their child from the father, not only telling their child lies about the father, but ignoring the parenting plan that was in place in the regular schedule. The father went directly to that child and, in essence, fought for the child, telling the child that he loved him, but the things he'd heard simply weren't true. He reclaimed the timeshare schedules with the child, and from then on had a very good, healthy relationship with the child and got beyond that.
Right. And so it's really important that, and the client with whom we work, this father, was initially kind of reluctant because he had come out of a gaslit, a little bit of a
he was gun shy.
And he was really nervous, but then, we helped him to see that it was like, hey, we're talking about your child here. We're talking about, a lifetime of future with your child. And
he was being ignored by this child. The child just wouldn't respond to anything that you did, any phone calls, texts, anything.
Right. So Walker goes on to say, he says that emotional flashbacks, says this is what happens, is that these are sometimes triggered. They give an overwhelming feeling state of childhood abuse or neglect, fear, shame, alienation, rage, grief. And so whenever somebody triggers that response that child felt in childhood, and they haven't identified it or recognized it or dealt with it, they will often respond in one of these 4 F's types. And so, let's just break this down and start with the fight. Okay, the fight type.
Okay, these fight types avoid real intimacy by unconsciously alienating others with their angry and controlling demands for those unmet childhood needs for unconditional love. So flight types, go ahead.
I was just going to talk a little bit more about this. So maybe you've all seen the fight type, right? And so the fight type is,
flight.
The flight type stays perpetually busy. They are the busy bee. They're industrious. They avoid triggering interactions of any kind. They're constantly on the go. Oh, I'm so busy. Yes, call me. Let's get together. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And then the next one.
The freeze types just, again, hide away in their rooms and reveries, whatever it is that takes them away.
And they isolate.
And there's so many tools nowadays, especially for younger folks, anybody to do it. You can just grab your phone at any moment and find 1,000 ways to get lost and not deal with whatever is confronting you.
Right. I mean, and certainly, I don't know, people who binge Netflix. I don't know, maybe, is that you? You're the one that can answer that. And then the last one, fawn types avoid emotional investment and potential disappointment by barely showing themselves. They hide behind this helpful persona. They act like Mother Teresa, right? They overlisten, they overdo for others, they give service, but they never really risk exposing who they really are, because they don't want the possibility of rejection. That is their ultimate.
So vulnerability is a huge problem for them.
Yes. Okay, so let's break this down and let's talk about the fight type and what kind of that profile looks like of the fight type.
Okay, the first one is the fight type and then narcissistic defense. We always love this topic of narcissism. Fight types are unconsciously driven by the belief that power and control can create safety, assuage abandonment, and secure love. Okay? These types learn to respond to their feelings of abandonment with anger and contempt. So whenever they feel this they lash out. The entitled fight may create a captured freeze or fawn type as a prisoner in a dominant submission relationship.
Okay, so let's stop there because that's really like some meaty stuff that Walker says. And we love how he writes this because it's so true. We've all experienced that either by witnessing it or living it, unfortunately, where you have seen somebody that power controls. I mean, hello, Game of Thrones, right? It's all about power and dominance and submission, right? And so the fight types, this is the bad part about it, though, is that they seek conflict. It's kind of like a sanctuary Jeff and I came up with, because they lash out from these undesired feelings of abandonment. They don't want to feel these uncomfortable feelings. It feels yucky to feel that way. And so this horrible cycle occurs where the fight type escalates by intimidating behavior, further alienating the fawn type or the submissive.
And they basically dig the hole deeper.
Right. And what happens is this fighter's feelings of abandonment become more intense. The fighter becomes more angry, more hostile, and further pushes this desired person that they want in their life away. And so this vicious cycle is not recognized by the fight type, especially if that fight type is a narcissist, because narcissists do not see through the lens of objectivity. They just aren't.
And they justify their anger and do not see the behavior as controlling. They think that they're always right.
Right.
A narcissist, essentially.
Okay, so let's go into the flight type.
The flight type and the obsessive-compulsive defense, all right? Flight types appear as if their starter button is stuck in the on position. That's always a funny image there. They are obsessively and compulsively driven by the unconscious belief that perfection will make them safe and lovable.
So this goes back to the secure attachment style. So we see this all the time, this busyness. You see it on social media. These are the folks on Facebook and Instagram who showcase their pictures of perfection. We had a client that we worked with who told us his ex goes to yoga from 9 to 10 every weekday, then immediately drives 25 minutes away in her 2018 Range Rover to get her specially made green juice and stops by the new art gallery in her yoga pants and Hermes scarf, and then back home to catch up on texts and emails and social planning before she arrives a half hour early in the traffic circle at school to pick up her 2 kids for their viola lesson and soccer practice. And he added, and it was very comical listening to him, she stays in the car at the traffic circle and calls out the window to Olivia's mom, Meredith, that Meredith should call her to get together sometime, but she's slammed to the end of the month.
Slammed with all these important things.
All these important things. So the flight person, and we don't mean to mock that, because certainly if that could be any one of us. We've all fallen into all 4 of these F types, these categories. But that person uses busyness as an escape and as a way to avoid those
to deal with things.
Rejected feelings of either being abandoned, not getting the emotional love that he or she needed as a child. All right.
Okay, the freeze type and the dissociative defense. Many freeze types unconsciously believe that people and danger are synonymous, okay, and that safety lies in solitude. Outside of fantasy, many give up entirely on the possibility of love. The freeze response, also known as the camouflage response, often triggers the individual into hiding, isolating, and eschewing human contact as much as possible.
And this is so... Walker is like hits the nail right on the head. And we see this in other species. I see this with, we have a pet house. We have a dog, 2 cats. We have visiting dogs from family members that come over all the time. But I'm especially intrigued with watching our cat, especially the male cat. We'll go out on our Florida lanai and hunt for little chameleons, these little lizards that will come up to him, and they do the freeze thing. That's a perfect example of the freeze thing. If you've ever watched a chameleon, he will get them in between his jaws, and the chameleon will go limp, absolutely freeze, and play dead, right? And so this freeze type person, completely drops doesn't do anything, doesn't move, doesn't do anything. Even if they have half a tail, their tail is off wiggling away on the other side of the patio. And
thanks for that image.
Yes. And they freeze. And sometimes this does well, right? We've heard about horrific examples where someone has frozen or played dead, and it's worked well. But in an emotional, healthy relationship, the freeze response is not a good one to use.
Okay, now the fourth one, the final one, the Fawn type and the codependent defense. Now, the Fawn types, they seek safety by merging with the wishes, needs, and demands of others. They act as if they unconsciously believe that the price of admission to any relationship is the forfeiture of all their needs, rights, preferences, and boundaries. They are usually the children of at least one narcissistic parent who uses contempt to press them into service, scaring and shaming them out of developing a healthy sense of self.
So, and this is where the people pleasers and the Fawn types kind of are like first cousins, right? And, codependency is defined as the inability to express their rights, their needs, their boundaries in a relationship. It's kind of like a disorder of assertiveness that causes someone to attract and accept abuse, neglect, or exploitation, allow themselves to be manipulated, allow themselves to be managed. And unfortunately, if people don't have a toolkit of other assertive behaviors and coping mechanisms, they unfortunately fall back into this default setting unless they've done some work to improve that. And so Walker names the Fawn response the fourth F in the fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And he says that codependent people learn to fawn early in life in a process that might look something like this.
She learns that quickly that protesting abuse leads to even more frightening parental retaliation, and so she relinquishes the fight response, deleting no from her vocabulary, and never develops the language skills of healthy assertiveness. The codependent toddler who largely bypasses the fight, flight, and freeze responses instead learns to fawn her way into the relative safety of becoming helpful.
So if this would not be the rebellious toddler saying no at one point or another, the compliant child. There's always one in every large family. There's always somebody. There's always like the black sheep. The Fawn is never the black sheep, right? And so safety is the ultimate goal for all four of the responses here: fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Everybody wants safety in their relationship. They want healthy, secure, and that can be earned or purchased by the fawner.
One of the real problems with this too is they eliminate all their boundaries. They're surrendered to mollify this parent as the parent repudiates the Winnicottian duty of being of use to the child, and the child is parentified and instead becomes as multidimensionally useful to the parent as she possibly can be. You're a housekeeper, a confidant, a sounding board, a surrogate parent to other siblings, etc. And the Fawn just is a doormat.
Right. And that is the safest place for this Fawn until he or she can grow up and develop some really healthy coping skills and defense mechanisms.
And we were helping, I know, a client recently with this concept because they were struggling with dysfunction in a lot of the relationships and felt actually uncomfortable when presented with a relationship that was different from what they had experienced. When they had felt someone who didn't present these kind of behaviors threw them off. It was so disorienting that they didn't feel like it was a right kind of fit for them, even though it was wonderful in every way they could describe it.
Right. And this particular client, whom we'll call Alice, was an overachiever. She had always been perfectly coiffed and combed and dressed and styled, and very successful in her career, had failed relationships or old relationships. We wouldn't call them failed, she did, but had old relationships where she was always attracted to either the underdog or the bad guy, one who was troubled and one who was emotionally
and where
distant.
she really had to earn. She really had to work to get that love.
Right.
She had to give up all of her things.
And so when she was presented with this healthy relationship, she didn't know how to deal with it because she had always climbed and clawed and earned her way into the hearts, the core hearts of men. And so she didn't understand when love was given freely and openly. And ultimately, she didn't think she deserved it.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the people that we follow, Amy Morin, who's a PhD, she talks about people pleasers in her work, 13 things mentally strong people don't do. And, there's a couple of solutions that she suggests that we have also suggested with many of our clients. And one of them is, stop comparing, and we go back to that social media stuff. It's so, you have to really be focused and have a presence of mind when you're on social media. We suggest people so that you don't subliminally compare yourselves to others.
Because it's so easy to look at these things going, oh, wow, their life is so exciting and wonderful. And, oh, they all get along perfectly and they're in the nicest places and they all look so good. And
right. And then you feel really crummy. So it's important that you recognize that when you're on social media, that you have the thought of, what is my purpose here? Why am I going on social media? And so that you don't default to feeling bad or depressed for that. And of course, there's studies out there, right, that you've all seen and heard that too much extended time on social media will lead to depression, or at least situational depression.
Then they also, Amy also mentions one of the things that we always talk about that is critical in a good relationship is embracing vulnerability.
And this is especially hard for someone who's a fawner because they are usually perfectionists, overachievers, and
they can't let their guard down.
Always compliant. And so we can't expose that inner stuff. Many fawners have never, ever been introspective because they never believed they were allowed to be.
They weren't allowed to be.
And then we say, of course, don't insist on perfection. And don't allow others to limit potential. And this we see all the time. There's so many people that come to us with goals and dreams that never got anywhere because maybe they ran it by somebody who didn't have their best interests at heart, or who was projecting their own stuff.
I was going to say projecting their own insecurities and their own fears and saying, oh, that'll never work, or
right.
Or don't do that. That's too dangerous, too risky, too something.
Right. And even in relationships, they'll say, oh, don't go out with this person. And you have to step back. So we suggest that you look at those relationships as hit the pause button before you enter into them.
I know Poppy and I, we've often talked about this when we got back together again after 32 years apart. Many different folks hearing about us doing this would often throw caution at us and say, oh, wait a second. You've been apart for 32 years. You just can't jump back into this thing. And I'm sure things have changed. What about your kids? What about this? What about that? And so it was something we were very familiar with and learned that we didn't let that limit us at all, because we did look at it with very open eyes, but did let our hearts open up, and we allowed ourselves to be completely vulnerable, and we were able to reestablish this wonderful love that we now share.
Right. So, okay, listeners out there, 4 F's.
In summary:
fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And if you'd like to develop some more work with us, we would be happy to give you a 30-minute free consultation. You can go to poppyandjeff.com, poppyandgeoff.com. You just email us, shoot us an email, sign up for a 30-minute free consult, and we'd be happy to explore this a little further if this is something that resonates with you.
Until next time, we're Poppy and Jeff with the Relationship Restaurant.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us.